My name is Daniel Dockin. Welcome to Module 0, Unit 4. The purpose of Unit 4 is to begin to give you the skills to confidently identify Japanese knotweed at any stage of its life cycle. We'll look at its appearance from young shoots in early spring through full summer growth to winter dieback. We'll also examine the crown and the rhizome structures, which are vital for understanding how the plant spreads and persists. Because not all knotweed looks the same, we'll cover stunted growth forms that can appear very different from typical tall summer stands. We'll also compare knotweed with the plants most often mistaken for it. While photographs and descriptions are useful, nothing replaces seeing the plant in the real world. If possible, spend time on site looking at live infestations in different stages of growth. This hands-on experience will sharpen your identification skills far more than relying on images alone. By the end of this unit, you'll be more confident in identifying Japanese knotweed accurately, which is essential for reporting, legal compliance, and planning effective management. In early spring, usually between March and April, however this varies across regions, Japanese knotweed starts its growth cycle with young shoots emerging from the ground. These shoots are typically reddish purple in colour, sometimes with a greenish tinge, and have tightly rolled up leaves at the tip. Growth at this stage is fairly rapid, up to 10 centimeters per day, and you'll often see several shoots emerging together from a single crown, creating a tight cluster. This shape and colour means they're sometimes mistaken for asparagus or peony tips, but the rolled leaves, reddish tone, and clustered growth are strong indicators that this could be knotweed. If you're in doubt when inspecting early season growth, raise your concerns with the client and arrange a follow-up. Returning a week or two later can make a big difference, as rapid growth will often make identification much clearer. This approach helps avoid misidentification and ensures you're acting on accurate information. The leaves of Japanese knotweed are one of the most important identification features in the summer. Each leaf is shield-shaped, which means it has a flat base and a pointed tip. The way the leaves are arranged is just as important. They're positioned alternately along the stem, never directly opposite each other. This is a reliable feature that can help rule out some common lookalikes, which often have opposite leaves. In the summer, the leaves are mid to dark green and typically measure between 8 to 15 centimeters in length, although larger leaves can occur during periods of vigorous growth. The surface of the leaf is smooth, with a prominent central vein running from the base to the tip, and a network of smaller veins branching outwards. When you're on site, always look at the leaves in combination with the stem structure and overall growth pattern. A single leaf shape alone is not enough for a confident identification, but when paired with other features which we'll cover, it becomes a very strong clue. Next, let's define the cane. This is the main uproot shoot you see forming the height of the stand. It's typically straight, no zigzags. It's hollow, green with reddish speckles, and marked with circular nodes at intervals. Canes are thicker than side growth or stems, especially near the base, and give the stand its tall, bamboo-like look. Japanese knotweed flowers appear in late summer, usually from August to September. These flowers are small, creamy white, and grow in loose clusters. In many cases, these clusters rise above the leaves and give the top of the plant a lighter, almost frothy appearance when in full bloom. The flowers attract pollinators such as bees, but in the UK, they very rarely result in viable seed. As we discussed in Unit 3, this is because seed production generally requires a cross-pollination with closely related species such as giant hogweed. For surveyors, flowers are a helpful late-season confirmation feature. They stand out visually and can be spotted from a distance. However, remember that by the same time that this plant is flowering, there will also be similar plants with similar creamy white flowers. In winter, Japanese knotweed dies back above ground, typically after the first frost. The leaves and stems wither away, leaving behind brown, brittle canes. These canes can remain standing for several years if they're not disturbed, often forming a visible outline of the previous season's growth. Although there is no active green growth above ground, the plant remains very much alive underground. The rhizome network is still intact and storing energy, ready to fuel rapid regrowth in spring. Winter is actually a useful time to inspect sites. With no dense foliage in the way, you can clearly see the pattern of crowns and old canes, which helps assess the size and spread of the infestation. It's also a good time to look for signs of previous disturbance or soil movement that might have spread propagules elsewhere on the site. While winter growth isn't as visually striking as in the summer, recognizing these canes and crown positions is a vital skill for year-round identification. The crown is a plant's growth point, the junction between the above-ground canes and the underground rhizome network. It is extremely dense and makes up a majority of the plant's total biomass. This density is why crowns can store so much energy over winter and support rapid, vigorous regrowth in spring. In established infestations, crowns are often raised, woody and knobbly in appearance, with multiple shoots emerging from them in the growing season. The larger and more complex the crown, the older and more vigorous the infestation is likely to be. Crowns are most visible in the winter and early spring, when foliage has died back and before new growth has emerged. During the growing season, they are hidden beneath the dense canopy of the leaves and stem. Being able to recognize crowns is crucial for off-season surveys as a replacement for stem. The rhizome is Japanese knotweed's underground stem system and is its primary method of spread in the UK. When freshly cut, rhizomes are a distinctive orange inside, particularly in older sections. Towards the growing tips, they become white and fleshy. These are the most active parts, containing high concentration of stored energy, ready to generate new shoots. One key identification feature is the way rhizomes break. When snapped, they break cleanly, very much like snapping a carrot, rather than tearing or shredding like many other underground plant parts. If rhizomes have been suppressed by something like a concrete pad, tarmac, or thick ground membrane, they often adapt by growing closer to the soil surface. In these situations, rhizomes are typically whiter, softer, and more concentrated in the upper soil layers. Even a tiny fragment as little as 0.7 grams, which is roughly a thumbnail size, can produce a new plant if conditions are right, which is why soil movement is one of the main ways knotweed is accidentally spread. When we talk about rhizome spread, older guidance, once published by the Environment Agency, described a flat sheet extending 7 metres horizontally and 3 metres deep. We now know that this is no longer correct, although actually it's good practice for biosecurity reasons. Thanks to a study conducted by Mark Fennell and PCA members, which assessed the impacts and rhizome lengths of Japanese knotweed in the built environment. If we take the 7 by 3 metre guidance note and apply that to a 1 metre square area of Japanese knotweed, it could work out that over 1,000 tonnes of material would need to be excavated. In reality, the growth pattern is more like an upside down triangle, spreading on average 3 metres from the main plant and towards 2.3 metres at the deepest parts. The broadest and densest part of the rhizome network is usually near the soil surface, where conditions are best for generating new shoots. This triangular profile is critical for planning excavation works. It shows that while most of the biomass and propagule material is concentrated in the upper layers, the deeper sections, although fewer, are still capable of regenerating if left behind. The actual shape, spread and depth of the rhizomes will of course vary depending on the plant age, the soil type, surrounding vegetation and even the history of the site. Stunted growth forms occur when Japanese knotweed is under pressure from environmental factors or control measures. These can include repeated cutting, herbicide application, heavy grazing, deep shading from other vegetation, or repeated soil disturbance. Over time, these factors can force the plant to adapt, producing shorter and thinner canes with smaller leaves than you would expect in a healthy, vigorous stand. In some cases, stunted knotweed can look very different from the typical tall summer growth, making it harder to identify. This is especially true if it blends into surrounding vegetation or resembles more common weeds. However, even when above ground growth looks weak, the underground rhizome system can remain extensive and well developed. Stunted knotweed can still regenerate rapidly if given the chance, so it must be treated with the same level of caution as more vigorous growth. For surveyors, the key is to look for the combination of traits: leaf shape, stem or cane structure, growth pattern, and any signs of previous treatment, rather than relying on height and vigor alone. Let's look at some of the most common plants mistaken for Japanese knotweed. First up is dogwood. Dogwood is a woody shrub that can sometimes be confused because of its cane-like stems, which are often red or green. However, the leaves are the key difference. Dogwood has opposite leaves, meaning they grow in pairs directly opposite each other, while Japanese knotweed leaves are alternate. Dogwood also develops clusters of small white flowers, but they are very different than knotweed's loose, creamy sprays. Next up is bindweed. This is a climbing plant that twines around other vegetation and fences. Its leaves are heart or shield shape, which at a glance can resemble knotweed leaves. However, bindweed's growth habit is completely different. As it climbs and it twines, it's not a stand-forming plant like Japanese knotweed. Another clear distinction is its large trumpet-shaped flowers, usually white but sometimes pink, which look nothing like knotweed flowers. Finally is dock. Dock produces large, broad leaves that emerge from a basal rosette, and this can sometimes be confused with young knotweed growth, but the stems are more solid, not hollow, and they don't form the tall, cane-like structures of knotweed. Dock also produces tall seed stalks with reddish-brown clusters late in the season, which are very different from knotweed's flowers. Now let's look at three more common lookalikes that are often confused with Japanese knotweed. First is bamboo, or more specifically, the Philostachys species of bamboo. Like knotweed, bamboo produces tall, hollow canes, which is why it is sometimes mistaken for it. However, bamboo canes are usually much taller and tougher. The leaves are narrow, they're lance-shaped, and arranged in tuffets. Another big difference is the underground system. Bamboo has a woody root system, whereas knotweed rhizomes are fleshy, orange inside, and snap cleanly like a carrot. Next is Russian vine. This is a very fast growing climber, sometimes called mile a minute. It produces masses of small white flowers and will often twine aggressively through fences, hedges and trees. While it is related to knotweed, its growth habit is completely different. Once again, instead of forming upright stand, it climbs and spreads outwards. Finally, the Persicaria species. These are close relatives of knotweed, which explains why confusion sometimes happens. Persicarias are generally smaller, sprawling plants with slender stems and elongated, often lance-shaped leaves. They lack the hollow cane-like stems of knotweed and instead have a softer growth habit. The important point is that while these plants share family links or growth similarities, their leaf shape, growth pattern, and underground structures are very different. Careful observation can quickly confirm whether you're looking at Japanese knotweed or a harmless lookalike. To recap Unit 4, we've built the skills to try and identify Japanese knotweed at every stage of its life cycle. You've seen how to recognize the plants as young shoots in spring, through its tall summer growth, and into winter dieback. We've focused on key underground and structural features such as crowns and rhizomes. We've also looked at stunted growth forms which can appear when the plant has been repeatedly cut, treated or suppressed. Recognizing these forms is important as they can look quite different from vigorous summer stands. Next, we explored the most common lookalikes, including dogwood, bindweed, dock, bamboo, Russian vine, and persicaria, and outlined the key differences that set them apart from knotweed. By combining these skills, you should be able to start identifying Japanese knotweed in the field, avoid misidentification, and provide accurate advice to clients.